Well, hello, everybody. This is Randy Wootton, CEO of Maxio, and your host of SaaS Expert Voices, the podcast that brings the SaaS experts to you to help us understand where we are today and what's happening tomorrow. I am delighted to have a friend and actual classmate join me, Dave Boyce. We've known each other for many years, but only have gotten to know each other really well in the last couple of years. And it's been a wonderful journey. In setting up this podcast, I had a chance to go back and look at Dave's background. Really impressive. Started off as a strategy consultant, then focused on product and go to market. First company bought by Oracle. In fact, he's a 4-time CEO. He had 3 exits as an operator, 2 as a board member. He now operates as an investor, and he's the chairman of Winning by Design, which is just an extraordinary company for anybody who's looking to figure out how to tune their go-to-market motions. He's an author. We'll share in the notes his Substack reference, and he's written a bunch of articles, and he's got a book coming out on PLG in March 2025. And he's got, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 kids?
6 kids,
Six kids,
yeah.
6 kids. I just wondered, when do you sleep? This is an extraordinary career.
Oh, you're so nice. Well, we only have 1 at home now. We're getting old. I don't know if you noticed. We're getting old, so it's feeling all the kinetic, chaos is winding down, and now we just have to deal with, emotional support.
Yeah, totally. With a little bit of financial support on the side as well,
support,
right?
yeah.
Everyone's coming back. Yeah, we're getting old, but you're staying. You don't have the gray hair that I do, so you're doing something right. One of the things about your background, I think, as I bring people on and talk about their career journey, and now you have had a career journey. Before we get to the topic of PLG, just you had this really interesting comment in our pre-brief about how did you make the pivots that you did in your career? What was your guiding principle? Or just, we don't have to go through the whole career story, but it is a really interesting story. Strategy consultant, product go-to-market guy, early stage startup, sell to Oracle, hang out at Oracle for a while, run a couple other companies. What's the common through line or golden thread?
Well, I'm working on kind of codifying this in a way that, maybe could help others. But for me, the thing that I know helps me stay the best version of myself is it has to be interesting. It has to be challenging. There has to be a non-zero chance of failure. That's what keeps me going. And then I have to really care about what I'm working on. So I have to care about who I'm working with, what I'm working on. And then, like I say, it's got to be interesting. I got to be, gaining some skills or knowledge or something. And so, I know other people optimize for, things like money, title, prestige. That just has never really done it for me. Didn't have the holding power for me. I needed to optimize for just keeping in the game and being interested in what I was working on.
Yeah. Similarly, I talk to people about setting up a forced rank list of their job satisfaction criteria. And in each stage there may be something different that you're solving for. And the one for me that has continued to be number one for the last several career shifts I've made is interesting. Exactly. It's intellectually stimulating. I call it operating at the edge of my own ignorance. Where am I going to go and learn something new? So, for example, leaving go to market where I'd been for 20 years and moving into the office of the CFO, it was I just don't want to have to do another MarTech startup or sit in the ad tech ghetto. It was let's go jump into something else. So I totally empathize with you. I think the other piece, which I would put as number 2 for me and guided which companies I've gone to, is this idea of being able to make an impact on an industry, a team, and a company. And as you get more senior, you move from being a team to company, but you clearly have been, as an investor, making an impact on people as a chairman of Winning by Design and the other companies you've been board members of, and then just CEO gigs where you come in and you're like, hey, this is going to be a problem that hasn't been solved, working with a great group of people. That's number 3 for me, is actually, do I like, respect, and trust the people that I work with? And I've left companies. I left Microsoft in part because that wasn't true anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm not afraid to say I left Oracle because of that.
But, don't tell Satya or Larry.
But I love that impact. It turns out when your eulogy is read, no one's going to read a line about how much money you made, but there will be some lines about the impact that you made on the people around you, maybe even on the industries that you served. certainly on your relationships, contributions. That all of that is impact stuff. It's
Yeah.
not earning stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Well, to that point, and we'll shift into the conversation today around PLG. It's one of the areas that were an early entrant into it. I'm catching up, and you're graciously providing a lot of background and context and help for me and my team as we think about PLG and the promise there. But maybe if you roll back the script a little bit and talk about what drew you to PLG, what was the first company you got involved with it, and now it's become an absolute passion for you. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, anyone who's kind of rolling up their sleeves on PLG right now is still in the top 1%.
Got it.
99.9% of the companies on the planet were built not using a PLG go-to-market strategy. So,
Oh, and maybe to that point, can you describe the difference? So we were just
yeah.
throwing acronyms around. So
Oh, yeah.
product-led growth versus sales-led growth. Maybe set the
Yeah.
context why this is new, and I think you're making us all feel good. It's sort of like AI. If you haven't already built an AI company, forget
Right.
about it.
You're too
But
late. Yeah. No,
yeah, right.
not
PLG
too
was
late.
that 2 years ago. Okay, go ahead.
And I get asked this all the time, product-led growth. Yeah. I think I know what that means. And just in case, could you just explain it to me? um, but and I've gotten better at it to where like my 16-year-old, the one that we have at home, can explain it now.
Okay.
It is a product that sells itself. So think about Netflix or Amazon or Uber or all these products in your personal life, Instagram that learned to use without anyone selling it to you, without anyone installing it. Okay, and then what about your business life? Oh, Slack, Zoom, Calendly, maybe you use
Grammarly. Yeah.
Grammarly,
Yeah.
Figma, like
Yeah.
Canva. There are
Yeah.
all these pieces of software that we also now use in our Google Suite that we use
Yeah.
in our personal or in our business lives that also have enterprise versions.
Mhm.
But I may have just adopted it by myself with no help, and then I may have gotten to a point where I said, oh, you know what, I actually do want to schedule multi-person meetings, so I'll go to Calendly Pro. Or, oh, you know what, I actually do want to standardize this across my company, so I'll go to an enterprise version of it. But I can start on an almost zero friction basis with nobody helping me, nobody teaching me how to do it. I don't have to watch a training video. I don't have to watch a demo. I just get into it. Kind of the way we use personal software in our personal life and the way we use software in our business life is converging. And that whole strategy of product selling and deploying and helping you succeed on your own is called product-led growth.
And that is in comparison to what would the other alternative be?
Yeah, so we talk about sales-led growth, just the easy comparison. There's lots of go-to-market models, but just to look at the two poles, it would be product-led growth and sales-led growth. And usually, sales-led growth either starts with an outbound motion, meaning like I identify my target customers, I go map kind of who the target personas are within those ideal customer profile kind of target customers, and then I start to warm them up with marketing, or I outbound into them, or both, with phone calls, emails, etc. There's also, sales-led growth is kind of an umbrella term that would include inbound marketing, meaning I put a lot of content out there, people find their way to me, but the call to action is not start now. That would be a product-led growth, like, hey, just start using the product. It's request a demo or talk to someone, and
There's
so then that
some
kicks off a human
inner
interaction.
Right, there's a human interaction. So marketing works across both.
Yeah.
How marketing strategies are developed, and we'll get into this in terms of the types of metrics you're looking at and how you measure the success of a PLG motion versus an SLG motion are different. Um, one of the things I think about just on that topic, Slack. So when I went to Rocket Fuel, I'd just come from Salesforce, and at the time, Benioff had built out Chatter and the he was talking about the social enterprise, and I thought it was a
Yeah.
great idea. And having Chatter attached to records and having everyone asynchronously be able to engage on opportunities and provide input, etc. And I remember I was pushing really hard for the entire organization to adopt Chatter because the
Sure.
value is when you have the entire network, and the engineers were using this thing called Slack. And I
Yep.
was like, Slack, what the hell is that? No, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to adopt another yet technology. And they're like, well, where are we? Like, literally, they rebelled against me and said, well, we're
Yeah.
not adopting Chatter. And I was like, you're kidding me, right? Like, we're a public company. We're going to do what I said. And they said, no. And so maybe there's something about, and Chatter really hasn't taken off other than when you're
And
at
then
Salesforce,
Salesforce went and bought
everybody has to do
Slack.
Chatter. And then they went and bought Slack. So
Right.
what, I mean, I'm totally taking this off script, but like, what would be the distinction then between the success of Slack and this kind of organic growth? You tell for two friends, they tell two friends versus Chatter and me being CEO and saying, we've got a relationship with Salesforce. Here's an add-on that we want to do because it falls into this broader wall-to-wall experience with Salesforce. 'Cause I do think there's a nuance there. Both
Oh,
are
yeah.
kind. So go ahead. If you have some thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
no, great question. I mean, the easy way to talk about it, and you framed it perfectly, teed me up. Fat pitch right over the center of the plate.
There you go.
um, Bottom up versus top down,
Hmm.
right? So,
Hmm.
like top down, we're used to, and when the first company that you mentioned that we sold to Oracle, our our average annual contract value when we sold that company, and it was a SaaS company, was $1.2 million.
Hmm.
That means we had a few less than 1.2 and a few more than 1.2, right?
Hmm.
$1.2 million. That's a top down sale.
Yes,
Has to be. Has to be.
absolutely.
You
Yep.
got to get, you got to make a business case. You got
Yep.
to get, financial sign off,
Right.
business sign off. You actually, they have to believe that they're going to benefit more than $1.2 million per year if they're going
Yeah.
to sign a check for $1.2 million per year. That's a top down. But Slack doesn't require a business case. It's bottom up. So one engineer, one team, not really one engineer. You need at least two people to
Right.
speak with each other on
Right.
Slack, but
Right.
one team at a time, then another team, and pretty soon, it's just meeting needs. It's meeting people where they are. It's
Hmm.
solving their job to be done
Hmm.
in a way that's friction free.
Hmm.
And it's almost impossible to stop when you get that right. Like once you get
Right.
that right, and then it goes from user to user to user to user. And then pretty soon, yeah, I mean, I've had the same experience, like, and it was with Slack. How did this get into the company? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I thought we were standardized on Microsoft. Well,
Yeah.
we're except for Slack, we are. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I just it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling. So I think, we'll get into that a little bit more, but this whole idea of, and I think the business model often associated with PLG is like a usage or consumption model versus an SLG is often
Mhm.
like an annual contract. So you can
Mhm.
have people sign up with their credit cards, and there's a direct correlation between the usage and the value that you're spending. And so it kind of, but because the size of contract, it's below the CFO, it's probably below the controller, it's some engineer, putting it on their credit card, no one's seeing it,
Yeah.
and then it's like a
Yeah.
cancer. It just gets in, and then it affects everything. I mean, I should come up with a better metaphor,
Yeah,
but
right.
I
Can I come back to I just want to pull on that thread a little bit.
sure,
The
yeah,
question
absolutely,
you asked, like, how did you get into this PLG?
yeah,
So we
perfect.
we sold that company to Oracle with the $1.2 million average ACV. Okay. I stayed there for a while, to your point, until I decided it wasn't for me. And I left and joined a little 5-person startup, and we rebranded, repositioned, kind of did all the thing. It really felt like a startup. And
Was this Fundly? Was
this
this
was
the
Fundly. Yeah, this
okay?
is called
Hmm. Yep.
Fundly. That was the rebranded name. And our ACV was $1,000,
Right.
not $1 million, not $100,000, not
Yep.
$10,000,
Yep.
$1,000. So
Yeah.
several orders of magnitude smaller. Well, you can't pay a salesperson to sell a $1,000 deal. You can barely even buy marketing to acquire a $1,000 deal, because it turns out I need to bring in more money than I spent every
Yeah.
time I get a customer. So I started, like, and I moved the company to Silicon Valley from Boston. And in Silicon Valley, there was some stuff going on with Dropbox. Basecamp's not there, but I was looking at Basecamp, um, Zendesk, and their threshold. That they were talking about, I need to be under the expense account threshold where I can indeed use a credit card, where a manager can make a decision on her own because it solves a problem for her. And I started thinking, okay, yeah, I'm under that threshold,
Yeah.
$1,000. Okay. So
Yeah.
now, how do I make it so easy to find and
Yeah.
so easy to adopt and so easy to succeed with that, you know, I will entice someone to do something they didn't plan on doing, which is, virtually swipe a credit card in order to continue the benefits of the product.
That's great. If we talk about SaaS, and a lot of people think SaaS is um, uh, a business model. It's actually a software delivery model that you're moving from on-prem to software delivered in the cloud. It also, though, with Mark Benioff and others, presupposed a type of subscription model. So you move from CapEx to OpEx, and CFOs love that, right?
Yeah.
And I think PLG introduces this low threshold of payments that's tied to value, and I think that also creates discipline in your marketing motion. It creates a discipline in your the way you think about satisfying customers' pain with your claim, the delivery of the capabilities, how you do fast iteration and improvements. So I think it's this really dynamic constraint, or I'm mixing two metaphors, but you've got these constraints in terms of your business model and what you can afford to do, and that
Yeah.
makes you super scrappy. So it
Yeah.
totally is in line with like innovation, fast fail, rapid turn type motions.
Yeah. And just to continue on that for 1 second, every single customer on a PLG motion is a tenant at will.
Correct.
They
Right.
can disappear anytime they want. Like,
Yeah.
if it's not
Monthly.
working for them, they're out of there
Yep.
monthly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
the beginning, when they're not paying for anything, and a lot of
Yeah.
these models start for free,
Yeah.
either a free trial
Yeah.
or a freemium.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could be gone. Their attention. If you don't hit the right notes within their attention span, like if they're not experiencing what I call first impact within whatever their attention span is, and some of us have a very short attention span,
Yeah.
they're gone. They're going to go
Yeah.
look at, result number 2 or result number 3 on their Google search and see if something else can do it for them, because clearly this one didn't, in 5 minutes
Yeah.
or in 20 minutes or in an hour
Right.
or in a day or however long, they're giving it. And so you see a lot of these um, solutions that in theory should be very, very complicated. Like an
Yeah.
example I like to use is Bill.com.
Yeah.
In theory, that should be very complicated. Like it's accounts payable, it's accounts receivable, it's setting up a schedule of accounts, it's authenticating it for ACH or bill payment. Like there's a lot of stuff in there. But I swear, the first time I used Bill.com, I was nervous about it. I was actually avoiding it because I don't want to get lost in some complicated APAR solution. I swear I had an invoice out the door and my bank authenticated within 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then from there, I've done more, right? From there,
Yeah.
you can kind of build on. But getting that first experience, and then these tenants at will come back, and then they come back again, and then they run into some constraints, like you said, like that say, well, if you want to do that, that's great, but you're gonna bump you up to the next tier. At that point, I'm happy to pay the next. I'm happy to pay for it because I've actually become dependent on it to solve problems in my life. So, one of the key tenets about product-led growth is um, we're going to seek to first create value and then extract value.
Hmm.
Opposite order of what we do in sales-led growth, where we try to convince someone that there will be value, but
Hmm.
it's going to come on the other side of you paying me money.
Right,
um,
and getting implemented and adopted, which can, for
right,
the large ERP solutions, could take years. So I
right,
think this idea, this focus on time to value,
right.
I used to describe it as get live in 5.
Oh,
And I have this
yeah.
incredible story about when I was at Microsoft and we were launching what became Bing. It was Microsoft Search. I brought a customer in to give us feedback on the interface. And the engineers at Microsoft are some of the smartest in the world. And they had created this super sophisticated targeting mechanism and how you picked your audiences and you did all these things and you had all these graphs, and it was just it was daunting. The UI and the UX was daunting. And the customer said, gosh, you don't have any market share. Google's super easy. I can get up and running in 5 minutes. I wouldn't spend the time on your interface. And our engineers started arguing with the customer why
Oh,
they were
right,
wrong. And I had
right,
to take the customer out of the room. Excuse me, I had to take the engineers out of the room and say, wait, these guys are right. And we need them to be strong advocates. I think it was like the top SEM agency in the UK. And the Microsoft engineers were arguing because of that perspective is we're going to tell you what you need, and we're going to tell you how Windows should be, and you're going to get value over time. And what's interesting is we launched the product, didn't get a lot of take up, and then spent the next 18 months making Bing look like Google in terms of
perfect.
the interface. Yeah.
Yes, I
I
did the
mean,
same thing with Fundly. It's like copying is not be that's not beneath us. If there's
yes.
something out there working, let's copy, and then we'll make it better from there. Yeah.
That's great. And I do think even more recently, this whole idea of Appleification of B2B apps, that
Mm.
everyone expects their B2B apps to work like their iPhone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
right? So then you have this discipline around UI and UX, which probably wasn't as invested in with sales led motions where you've got buffer of account managers, et cetera. You got engineers who are building
Right.
stuff because we think this is the way it should work. But there
Yeah.
is this higher level of expectation, to your point,
Yeah.
with people with short attention span, but also they're like, look, I know there's other apps out there that feel better, they look better, and it's easier for me to get done what I need to get done.
Amen. The cool thing is it doesn't have to be either or anymore.
Right.
I know we're
Right.
talking about these two poles, but if you
Yeah.
think about all the companies we named and plus some others, Dropbox, um, Canva, Calendly, Grammarly, Figma, Slack, Zoom, these all have enterprise editions,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
you can start by yourself or with a team, but at some point, you're going to get to a point where, like you did with Slack, where you're like, "Hey, what's going on? Why do we have Slack everywhere?" And some salesperson's going to have a conversation with you and say, "I bet you'd like to know which licenses you have where. I bet you'd like to
Yeah.
know something about usage. I bet you'd
Yeah.
like to tie into some of our enterprise security features. I
Yeah.
bet and you're going to be like, "Well, wasn't my plan, but yeah, if we're going to have it, we better have it right."
That's right. Amen. And so I think that was one of the questions that we were talking about was, at least when I started at Maxio, walked in like my first day, first all hands, and I kind of knew PLG, I kind of knew SLG. I mean, the distinction was kind of lost on me. And one of the people asked in the all hands, PLG or SLG, what's the future? And I thought, like, gosh, I don't think it's either or, but there
Mm,
is this debate of PLG versus SLG. But I think what you're pointing out is a lot of companies may start PLG. They eventually evolve to an enterprise model where you do have a buying committee and a sales committee. You do have a different level, different aspects of value that need to be articulated into a package, and it probably moves to an annual contract. So maybe speak a little bit. Like, do you think this dichotomy between PLG and SLG is false, and that the world is really hybrid, or how do you think about that?
yeah, I mean, the easy answer is yes, it's a false dichotomy, but I need a big asterisk there
Okay, all right.
because I'm going to run the PLG side of the company according to a certain set of metrics
Yep.
that tell me when things are working and when they're not.
Right.
And when I look at SLG, I'm going to look at a different set of metrics that tell me when things are working and when they're not. And then the challenge is going to be to have those two halves of the company work together. So I can't get mixed up and say, well, you didn't have a 6-month CAC payback, so that's a terrible customer,
Yeah.
because on the SLG side, I actually may spend more to acquire a customer than, 6 months worth of revenue, but I have much higher retention rates. And so that, the benchmarks are different and maybe I can afford a 12-month CAC payback.
Yeah.
But so I can't apply PLG standards to SLG, but the reverse is also true. I can't require giant contracts out of the PLG customers because that's just not the way they start. So you'll hear like sales leaders say, I don't roll out of bed for less than $50,000 or
Yeah.
$100,000 or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, great. On that side of the business,
Yeah.
great. But on the PLG side of the business, we've actually hired the product to sell itself. So if it comes in $1 more than it cost me to acquire them, we're open for business. Like,
Right. The unit
um,
cost economics being super clear, because if you get it wrong in PLG, you can turn upside down. I
yeah,
think that your point is, sort of framing it, is there's segment based approach in terms of your monetization
yes,
strategy.
yeah,
And so if you're at an SMB level where the customer's willingness to pay is at $1,000, your ability to deliver has to be at like $990 or less and all in. And so how do you create systems, advertisement for Maxio, to help you understand the nuances and loading up costs, so you're getting the unit cost economics? And then
yeah,
I think the other thing is the point that you're making. I think a lot of salespeople and sales leader are afraid of PLG because they think, well, oh, the CEO is going to fall in love with PLG
right,
and they're going to fire all the salespeople. And instead, it's the no, 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 no. PLG is the funnel widener. As long as we can get more people in and start to build in at brand building, like how do you get people to know who you are? They get to try it, they have a great experience with it, and then at some point they may buy. But even if they are only paying, to your point, 10%, that's probably an okay margin for you to make because of the potential to convert and grow those customers over time.
yeah. I mean, we hold ourselves to a pretty high standard on both sides on a percentage basis, but um, but I love the point that you just made about the funnel widener.
Yeah.
It's like and this is the cutting edge of this is the state of the art today. So, have a bunch of companies, multi-billion dollar companies been built up in PLG, yes. And of course, we know that most of the world was built up in SLG. But how do those things work together? That funnel widener concept is a really interesting thing. Like, hey, I got my net out there. Lots of fish are swimming into it. Once in a while, a fish is going to swim into it that's called like Nabisco
Yeah.
or
Right.
Delta or
Yep. Yep.
GE.
Yep.
And when a fish like that gets in there, I I'm okay with, a team getting started on
Yep.
it, but at
Yep.
some point I wanna know it's a target ICP
Yep.
and they've got some usage metrics that are interested. Now I wanna kick it over for a sales conversation because
Yep.
just like you with Slack, somebody owns a bigger budget there, somebody has a bigger agenda there, and somebody could sponsor a wider deployment.
Yep.
So now I want a salesperson talking to that account. I don't want these two sides of the business fighting against each other.
Yeah.
I want them working together.
100%. Yeah, gosh, lots of stories you could go down. But given where we are, one of the things a lot of folks you're talking about are going to be like, well, gosh, PLG, I understand broadly what it is, how it's different than SLG. Sounds like there's a lot of work to be done. And your opening comment was like, only the 1% of the people are even really playing with it right now. Can you talk through your experiences, both as an operator and as an investor, in terms of the three phases of rolling out a PLG type business? Because it's more than just self-serve instantiation. And then to your point around metrics, maybe
Yeah.
we talk through the three phases, and then we can talk about the key metrics that you are looking at to ensure that you're getting it right.
Cool. So now we're talking to, executives who are involved in sales-led businesses who are thinking about, how might PLG relate to me, and if
Me.
I want it. Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
scared because we're like, whoa,
yeah,
this looks really hairy and scary. If we get it wrong, it's a huge level of investment. I know I got to make the product more intuitive. So investing in UI, UX, but
yep,
it's more than just a product thing. It's this a
yeah,
whole business thing.
yeah,
So yeah.
so it is. There's it is easier than you think. It can be fairly formulaic, but there are three really hard pills to swallow. um, One is mindset, one is talent, and one is timeline. And the timeline one just kills us. Mindset, I'm going to get in like you just said, I'm going to get in an empathy and generosity mindset where I'm really, really simplifying down and meeting a customer right where she is. Okay, got it. And I'm going to put metrics into the product so that when she's stumbling or not making her way through, I'll know about that because I don't have a human in the room anymore, either selling or implementing or, coaching or training. That customer is on her own and I need to know when she's having trouble. So that's all that UX, it's empathy, generosity, and metrics help me get that user experience right. Okay, so that's mindset. Might be hard for some companies, might not be hard for some companies. It's a really thrilling problem to tackle, in my opinion. Talent is something that probably beyond the scope of this call, but we are going to need to dedicate humans to it. It can't be anyone's part-time job. Like we're going to need to put humans on it who are very talented and they might be talented at their current job. They're not going to do their current job anymore. They're going to do this job. And they're not going to do it with half of their brain. They're going to do it with all their brain. So we're going to actually have to carve some people off. And then timeline, that's where it gets tough. And you talked about the three phases. Each of those phases can be a year long.
Hmm.
And that is discouraging. But here, and everyone will say, well, how can I shorten it? And what if I already have a product? And what if I already know my customer really well? And okay, let's have all that conversation. But, you look at Canva, Figma, Twilio, they all took 3, 4, 5 years to get any sort of meaningful ARR going that would get any sort of, executive level sponsor excited about what they just teed off. And so in year 2, you're getting pretty nervous. You're not seeing ARR.
Yeah.
Well, what are you
Yeah.
seeing?
Yeah.
What, so
So what are
that
the three phases? So
so that begs the
introduce the three
question: what
phases
are you
again.
seeing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So in phase 1, we're going to go after product market fit. So we're going to take whatever the use case is that our current product solves, and we're going to reduce the aperture down to a subset of functionality that solve a specific use case for a specific end user that we think has the authority to go, on her own behalf or on behalf of her team, go make a decision for a, below the threshold purchase decision like we talked about.
Yep.
We don't have to solve everything. Just
Yep.
like Bill.com, we're going to solve one thing,
Yep.
right? In
It's
the
just
beginning.
that focus, total
Yeah.
alignment with something where there's a lot of pain, right?
Yeah.
For an individual who's
Yeah.
willing to give you a shot. But okay.
And
So
hopefully
how
it
do you
matches
measure
up.
that?
Then we're going to measure that based on 70% of new account starts achieving first impact within their attention span. And we'll quantify that attention span. It might be 20 minutes, it might be an hour, it might be a week, it might be a month, depending on but we're going to say 70% of our new account starts achieve first impact, meaning they publish their first schedule or their first design, or they look at their first dashboard or whatever the thing is that our product does. And let's say within one day.
Hmm.
Well, so you've got your live by 5 or live in 5,
Yeah.
whatever that it's basically that metric.
Yeah. Right.
Because why would I want to bring 1,000 more new customers in if I know that half of them are going to fail?
Right.
I want 70% of them to succeed. Then I can start focusing on the next thing, which is go to market fit.
Okay.
Right? So now I'm looking for a scalable source of new customers to bring into this user experience where I know 70% are going to succeed. And that scalable source of new customers has got to be economic.
Hmm.
So I'm going to look for CAC payback. It's an easy thing, Spend $1,000 to acquire a customer, take 6 months to get that $1,000 back. Take 9 months to get that $1,000 back. I generally say I'd like a CAC payback of less than 1 year.
Yeah.
Now, there
Yeah.
are some industries where you can argue yourself that it's higher or some that it's lower. But the thing I love about CAC payback is you're not speculating about what might happen 6 years from now because you're
Right.
assuming a 90% retention
Right.
rate and a
Right.
90% gross margin. It's
Meaning like
cash
the
on cash.
LTV to CAC ratio, where
Right.
people are throwing the gross margin and churn in, and you're like, "But really? Like,
Right.
you haven't even been in business a year, and you're saying your customers are going to be there for 10 years."
Right.
Like, it's a missed assumption. But back to the product market fit. When we were talking earlier, I love this. 70% of new users achieve first impact, like the time to value, and
Yeah.
forcing to improve that. And I even know as an SLG company, we are really focused on that because we're talking about, in comparison to ERPs, which take months to get up and running, we can get up running in weeks. But for a
Mm.
PLG motion, we'd have to be able to do it in days, to your point, to keep their attention. You did talk about one other metric, which was the usage retention curve flattening out. Can
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah.
talk a little bit about
Yeah.
how that's
Yeah.
another
Mhm.
indicator of product market fit?
Yeah, it takes a little longer to track this. That percentage of new accounts achieving first impact within days or weeks, that takes days or weeks to measure, right? Usage retention, I'm actually gonna measure, like, how often are they coming back and hitting features or logging into the product and achieving impact over time. And a
Hmm.
percentage of my customers, on day one it's 100%, then it's going to go to, you know, let's say 70% are going to get through that first impact before they lose interest. And then what happens after that? Does it go 50, 30, 10 to 0? And and that whole cohort dies? Or does it flatten off where, like, after 1 month, I still have 65%. And after 2 months, I still have 64%. And after 10 months, I still have 64%. I want that retention curve to flatten out, which tells me, okay, out of the 100 people I brought in, 64 of them actually, ended up getting long-term value. And since we know recurring revenue is a function of recurring impact, I'm now in a really good spot.
Yeah, and so I've heard people talk about that in terms of like daily average users or monthly average users, or
Yep.
breaking it out by modules in the
Yep.
product and seeing how people are using it. That then means like you have to instrument your product.
Yeah.
Do you have some best practices in terms of what technologies people should try to integrate into their application, or how to design the application to be able to get those product metrics, product usage metrics, which are going to be different than the financial metrics that the CFO is reporting on the financial statements?
Yeah, so we're gonna go get Mixpanel or Pendo Analytics or Amplitude or even Google Analytics. Google Analytics is more for a web-based product.
Right.
If we're right in the product, we're gonna use one of those other things. And the key events along the kind of customer journey life cycle that we want to measure, those at the very least need to be tagged so that I can track, a customer journey. Um, Engineers will want to, tag everything, and that's fine, and you put it all into a big, data lake and let your analysts loose. But at the
Yeah.
very least, I need to know things like daily active, weekly active, monthly active usership. I need to have defined what that means. It's not just a login. It's actually, hitting a
Yes.
core feature.
Yeah.
So that means my core features have to be tagged.
Yeah.
And these things are pretty easy now. All of those platforms I just mentioned, they'll visualize. Once you tag them, they'll visualize everything and show you kind of cohorted customer journeys to where your team can now optimize.
Yeah, I think of that great article that we probably read back in business school 100 years ago, but staple yourself to an order.
Great
And
article. Yeah.
yeah, I know. And how do you think about the information flow, the interaction between customer and in my world, I usually use it's an employee of how they're getting people up and running. But in this case, it's information flow, customer interaction with product.
Yeah.
And how does it get
Exactly that.
simplified? How do you automate it? How do
Yep.
you identify, I think to your point, like these key moments of delight where they got something up and running. They get the credit card up and going. Whoa, that worked. Then number two, they launched the invoice to your point in less
There
than
you go.
15 minutes, like
Right.
in business. And then you get your first summary of billing for all your customers at month one. You're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing in the world. And then 6 month trend reports. So like it's all these little
Mm.
moments of where the
Yeah.
customer they're either doing something and it seems or frictionless or as frictionless as possible, or they're being delighted by the way they're being invited through the product and the experience that you've created
Amazing.
for them.
Yeah. And, it's got to be, for those of us that are used to running enterprise products, this has got to be simple. Like we're probably
Yeah,
going to hide a bunch of the power
yeah,
of our
right,
platform in the beginning
right,
so
right.
that we can help that customer be delighted in their initial introduction.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's super interesting about being a Maxio. We've got two companies been around for 12 years each, about 2,400 customers, bring two platforms together. It's a huge surface area product. And you're like, well, we can never make that PLG ish because everybody wants to do this. But I think to your point, I don't know, maybe you come out with a sub brand or you call it Maxio Lite. But what
Yeah.
it does is just these things really well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's cash management, and then from that you have this logical way for people to add additional
Yeah.
capabilities that get lit up or they get turned on through feature flags. But
Amazing. Yep.
it's sort of like, how do you get into the head of your the ICP and the persona and understand what is the most critical problem that they're wrestling with, that if you're able to provide a solution that's super low cost that delights them, is going to get them into your net.
I cannot improve on that.
Right. Well, I read all your stuff, so I'm just
There you
playing
go.
it back for you. Okay, so we talked about product market fit. We talked about go to market fit. The two dimensions on that is scalable source of new customers and CAC payback less than 12 months. Was
Yep.
there a metric that you were thinking in terms of what captures? Do you have enough new customers in your SAM to
Yeah.
to to continue the investment?
Yes, yeah. So that would be an analytic exercise.
Hmm.
Totally. You're Tam and Sam, like Sam for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep.
I and depending on how I'm acquiring these customers, let's say I'm getting them all. I'm a member of. Uh, I'm in the Android App Store. Okay, great. Well, that's gonna define how many customers you have access to. Or I'm
Right.
in the Salesforce marketplace. Okay, got
Right.
it. Well, that's gonna define. Or I'm an English language only, US currency only, whatever for mid-market customers. Okay, that's great. And then, there's some percentage of those that would oh, and I'm acquiring via AdWords. Okay, well, I
Yeah.
know something about AdWord auctions. I know something about where I'm going to run out of juice. Like I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay $1,000 a click,
Right.
Um,
You have your
so
efficient frontier, right?
yeah,
And
I've got my
you're getting down to your
yeah,
return on ad spend and all that sort of thing.
all
Yep.
that
Mhm.
stuff. So
Yeah.
so however I define that, yes, I need a scalable source of potential customers that can come through on a unit economic basis that
Right.
will deliver a CAC payback of, less than 12 months.
Awesome. And so now we move to the third phase, which is the scale phase. And just now it starts to feel a little bit more SLG. Can you talk a
Right.
little bit about, the broad buckets of metrics that you're using at that point to have a
Yeah,
viable business unit?
at this point it feels like SaaS, all of us who are
Yeah.
used to running companies, we're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I recognize a growth model, like a
Yeah.
growth model that is driven by bookings,
Yeah.
renewals,
Yeah.
and expansions."
Yeah.
Um, but you know what? That growth model is really important, and this is where I think the office of the CFO and any go-to-market function should be just hand in glove.
Yeah.
I need to understand that growth model. I need to understand which portions of that growth are dependent on new customer acquisition, and then where's that going to come from? Which portions are dependent on renewals, and where's that going to come from? And so that gets to our segmented GTM if we have two separate ones. And then which portions are going to come from expansion. And by
Yeah.
the way, if I've got a self-service GTM that's landing SMB customers, I might be able to acquire them more rapidly and more cheaply. I might be able to retain them a little bit less well, and I might be able to expand them not very much at all.
Yeah.
And the inverse might be true for my sales lead. It might cost me way more to acquire a customer, but they're going to retain better, and they're going to have expansion on the back end because I'm landing small and expanding within an enterprise. So I just need to understand that, and then I'll just
Yeah.
measure that, as a CFO and a GTM leader.
Yeah, I think that's where you start to get into the MRR roll forward. You get into your customer cohort analysis, being able to look at by date, by region, by segment, and really understand the ARR build, and churn, contraction, and expansion, and what's working, what's not. Um, we're going to wrap up in just a couple minutes. One thing that struck me when you talked about, I really loved it, the mindset, talent, and timeline as a framework for thinking about the business. I'm reminded of the McKinsey model, the Horizon 1, 2, and 3 model.
Mm,
And that as a business, as you're trying to figure out the next act, you have to be able to do more portfolio management. And there's going to be a set of things that you're depending on for revenue this year. There could be a set of things you're betting on Horizon 2. They're going to come in the next 12 to 18 months. And then Horizon 3 are the set of things that are going to potentially change your entire business,
mm,
but they're not going to pay off for the next 3 years. And
yeah,
so and even in my budget and talking with my team and then with the board, it's like, here's a couple of the Horizon 3 bets. PLG would be one of those that's falling
yeah,
into that. What is the appropriate level of investment for year one of a 3-year payoff? In your experience, as companies like ours that are a little bit bigger, Series C, Series D, so we can carve off and have dedicated focus and capacity. What's the biggest challenge you run into coaching CEOs about? No, it's a Horizon 3 bet. You got to keep it ring fenced, and they're measured. They're not measured on revenue. They're measured on a number of customers adopting and time to live and those sort of things. What's been the biggest challenge you found trying to make that case?
yeah. It's just getting that time frame. Just like you
Mm,
said, like it's just that time frame. Like, hey, I made this bet 12 months ago. Where is my
yeah,
return?
yeah,
And then you say, well, here's your return. It's in usage retention, and they're like, sorry, that doesn't pay the bills.
that's right.
So we need to set that up front. It's not a huge. I mean, this is 5 people. They're talented people. It's painful
Yeah,
to pull them out of the places,
yeah,
but it's 5 people that I need to protect,
yeah,
and then I need to be willing to let them work on this for 3 years. Now I need to
yeah,
hold them accountable to product market fit metrics, and then I need to hold them accountable to go to market fit metrics. After which, I'm probably seeing ARR show up in a way that I kind of like.
yeah,
But if I love I'm gonna. I forgot about that. I'm gonna start using that. That Horizon 3 kind of investment
yeah,
mentality is
yeah.
gonna help a lot. Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I mean, we did this at Maxio. We had this business unit, payments business unit, and it was the exact same thing: is how do we ring fence a group of people? It was a small group of folks. They've been working on it for a year, dedicated and committed, and we reported on it separately. And guess what? It's working, and it's now starting to generate some ARR, but it's not going
Yeah.
to pay the bills at the end of the day. Now we need to, invest in how do we get that attached to every customer? How do we get it attached to every new prospect? But we got it over that initial hump of the Horizon 3. We had no experience there. We hired some people to come in and do it. And, at one point we were like, well, I don't know if we can make this work on a profit basis. And it was like really interesting. It's super, but that's where the executive team should be spending the majority of their
Yeah.
time, I think,
So
is on reinventing the business.
I would love to just double down that. I know we're wrapping up. I'd just
No,
love
no,
to
go ahead.
speak to the CFOs that I think is your core
Oh,
audience,
right.
and we'll just related to PLG.
Yeah.
We are building a flywheel.
Yep.
We're not looking for acts of heroics.
Yep.
You know, a heroic salesperson can drag a $3 million deal in the back door on day 365 of the year and save our quarter. Okay, fine. We're not looking for that. We're looking for a flywheel, repeatable processes. A flywheel is a piece of a machine that, like a weighted wheel, that once you get it spinning is very hard to stop. That's
Yep.
what we're trying to build. These are
Yep.
not big deals, but they
Yep.
come in reliably. We're
Yep.
programming it into the product itself, and so that usage actually drives more, and then it gets
Yep.
bigger and bigger. And
Yep.
so the metrics that I'm going to look at in year 2, I need to become convinced if I'm a CFO, which means I need to kind of understand it a little bit,
Yeah.
that I'm building flywheel metrics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then in year 2, when I'm looking at go-to-market efficiency, I want to be convinced that that's repeatable and
Yeah.
standard, and and I'm building a flywheel.
Yeah.
Then in year 3, to your point, when the revenue comes, it's going to come in a reliable kind of week after week, day after day, week after week. When
Yeah.
I built Fundly, my first PLG company, it was a complete mind blow for me. I could wake up in the morning and check the logs and see new customers.
Yeah.
And
Like the
then,
promised land.
yeah. And then to know where, like, revenue was, I had to go check the logs.
Yeah.
I did, and nobody knew. It's not like a salesperson had talked to them. It's just people had found their way in and they had monetized on their own. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. If I can get this thing to scale, we're golden.
Oh man. Great. So we're going to close with the speed round. The speed round, the 3 components. What's your favorite metric? What's your favorite book other than your own? And is there an influencer out there that you like to track? So favorite metric, as you think about all the metrics we've talked about, what do you think is the number one key to success? Maybe just for getting PLG up and running.
I think I gave it away already, but I really like CAC payback. It's cash on cash
Yeah.
metric. Yeah. And you
Yeah,
don't have
and
to,
it forces unit economics. It forces discipline in terms of how do you bring
yeah.
things together. You can even roll that into like an MPV and think about, hey, we're going to make this investment versus other investments, and when are you going to get the return? So I think there's a little bit of a CAC payback or yeah. Okay,
It's
book
a no
favorite.
nonsense version.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Favorite
Favorite
book.
book.
Well, my favorite business book is a book by Clay Christensen called Competing with Luck.
Oh, I
Um,
haven't read that one. Oh, okay, right
or
on.
Competing Against Luck. And the reason
Competing
I like, I
against
mean,
luck.
it carries
Mhm.
forward a lot of his theories around, the innovator's dilemma and the innovator's
Sure.
solution. So it
Yeah.
repeats a lot of that in the beginning, but then it
Yeah.
really gets into this concept of job to be done, like really understanding the problem that you're solving. And it breaks down some of our previously held notions about customer segmentation. It's really more about understanding the job. So, anyway, that's a great
Ah.
book. I love it.
Awesome. That's
And
my favorite part. I get to
yeah,
learn about new
and
books.
you
Oh,
probably, I'm sure Playing to Win. That's my number
oh yeah,
2, but I love that book too.
yeah. I think playing to win. Uh, my favorite story about this is so when I went to Salesforce, there was a guy there. Oh, did you do playing to win at Deloitte? Is that how you got exposed to it
So
and
I knew,
Monitor?
yeah, Monitor. I knew Roger Martin at Monitor. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
So, Pavel Zamito Ramirez was one of the top dudes at Monitor. They had built this process about playing to win, which is a strategy book,
yep.
and they had done it at Monitor, got bought by Deloitte, and then Zamito Ramirez came over to Salesforce with my boss, and I
Oh,
had,
there you go.
honest to God, I had this. My entire life in the business sector has been like, well, I'm not strategic enough. I don't know how to do strategy. And if you want to be a CEO, got to do strategy. And playing to win was this incredibly powerful experience in
Yeah.
terms of how to lay out strategy across those 5 questions. I've used it at 4 companies now.
Oh,
It
amazing.
has been really transformational in terms of one, me framing strategy for the board, and number 2 is bringing a team together to rally around how you think about those different questions in an ongoing conversation.
It's a great book.
All right,
Amazing.
last one for you. Influencers, people that you just one that you think everyone should be getting up in the morning and either listening to on a podcast or reading their stuff on LinkedIn.
Oh boy. I'm not like I'll tell you, I'm a fanboy of some authors, but I don't really know. I
Oh,
don't really follow them on LinkedIn or podcasts.
okay.
So like, I really like Jonathan Haidt.
Okay.
He's a psychologist and he's got multiple books, and I don't know how active he is on social, but anything that he publishes, I read because it really helps me understand how to be a human and how to interact with other humans.
Wow. Well, on that, I'm gonna have to go find him too, dude. You just added like 6 books to my, stack of books on my bedside table. But as always, Dave, it's been a great pleasure to chat. Really have enjoyed and appreciated all that you've shared, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Amazing. Thank you, brother.